The revolving doors sighed open, spilling a wave of cool lobby air onto the sidewalk. My shoulders ached from 3 days of red-eye flights, back-to-back meetings, and the final handshake that had sealed a multi-million-dollar contract in Phoenix. My carry-on rattled behind me, still tagged from the return leg. Then I saw it. A black trash bag sat propped against the sleek glass entrance, a strip of masking tape slapped across the front. My name, Maricela Cardenas, was scrawled in thick marker. Inside, the shape of my framed awards pressed awkward ridges into the plastic. The bright green leaves of my desk plant poked out from a tier, soil dusting the tape. My coffee mug's handle stuck up like a broken bone. For a moment, I thought it had to be a mistake. Then I saw her. Lorna Dresch stood a few feet away, perfectly centered in the lobby like she was posing for a magazine profile tailored suit. Lacquered nails, eyes sharp as glass. Around her clustered half a dozen colleagues. Some looked confused, others smirked. "You're out," she said, voice carrying over the morning chatter, downsizing, no explanation, no meeting in her office, no warning. The timing was deliberate. The elevator banks behind her were busy with the morning rush people pouring in with coffee cups and laptop bags, slowing just enough to watch. It was a theater scene, and I was the intended spectacle. I kept my grip on the carry-on handle, reached for the trash bag with my other hand. It was heavier than it looked. My certificates shifted inside, the glass frames clinking against each other. I imagined the headlines if anyone bothered to write them. Top performer discarded with yesterday's lunch. Lorna's gaze stayed on me, waiting for the outrage, the protest, the breakdown. It didn't come. I met her eyes, and instead of giving her the satisfaction of a scene, I let my lips curve into the faintest smile, the kind you give when you've already decided you won't play by their rules, without a word. I turned, the weight of the bag pulling at my arm, the wheels of my carry-on ticking over the pavement. By the time I reached the street corner, the lobby doors had closed behind me, sealing the performance inside. The morning air was brisk, clean, and full of possibilities. I didn't grow up believing doors would swing open just because I knocked. The apartment above my mother's tailor shop smelled of fabric glue and starch, and the sound of her sewing machine often ran long into the night. She used to tell me, "Maricela, be so good they can't ignore you," her fingers flying over a seam as if to stitch the words into my future. By 16, I was working afternoons in the shop and evenings bussing tables, saving every tip in a coffee tin under my bed. College was a patchwork of scholarships and double shifts, a careful balance of exhaustion and determination. 4 years later, I walked across a stage with my degree and a 3.9 GPA, knowing I'd earned every decimal. The job at Dresch & Alden Consulting felt like a finish line and a starting gun all at once. I built my reputation in quiet ways, untangling chaotic supply chains, smoothing over client disputes, closing accounts no one else could save. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. It didn't take long to notice the pattern. In every quarterly presentation, Lorna's name appeared on my solutions. At first, I told myself it didn't matter as long as the clients were happy. The company grew, and I kept my position. But over time, the theft of credit became less subtle. I'd hand her a completed project file in the morning and see her presenting it as her own by afternoon. 2 weeks ago, I stayed late to prep for the Henderson pitch. The office was nearly silent except for the muffled hum of voices drifting from Lorna's glass-walled office. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the door was ajar, and the words carried. "She's becoming a problem," Lorna said. Who Tristan asked, "Maricela, clients are asking for her directly. Henderson specifically requested her for Phoenix. My niece starts next month. She'll take over those accounts." I stood frozen. my folder pressed against my chest, their laughter slicing the air. It wasn't downsizing they were planning. It was removal. That morning in the lobby had been the final act of a play she'd scripted weeks in advance. The thought didn't make me angry. It made me precise. If she could turn my success into a threat, I could turn her betrayal into my leverage. The suitcase lay half unzipped on my bedroom floor, clothes spilling out in a loose pile. I was sorting through the wreckage of the week hotel receipts, business cards, my presentation notes when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Maricela Cardenas. The voice was crisp, certain. Yes. Who's this Martin Falk? Henderson Logistics. I straightened. Mr. Falk Martin. He corrected. I just heard from Lorna that you've left the firm. There was a hesitation, the sound of disbelief tightening his tone. She said you quit suddenly. The absurdity of it made me pause. That's not exactly accurate, I said carefully. I didn't think so. He replied, frankly. I was surprised you weren't at the follow-up this morning. We signed with Dresch and Alden because of you, Maricela. Your analysis of our distribution bottlenecks and that custom scheduling model, that's why the board approved the deal. Hearing it put plainly like that settled something inside me. Lorna could claim credit on paper, but the client knew the truth. I appreciate you saying that, I said. I'm not saying it to be polite, he went on. I'm saying it because I need you on this project. Without you, the whole implementation is at risk. And between us, his voice lowered, my team doesn't have much confidence in whoever they've replaced you with. I leaned against the dresser, phone pressed to my ear. You're telling me this for a reason. I am. I'd like to meet. No Dresch and Alden, no Lorna, just us. We can talk about how you might still be involved, independently. The word hung there, independently, sharp and bright. All right, I said slowly. When tomorrow noon, my office downtown, I'll have my assistant send you the details. We ended the call, and I set the phone on the dresser, my reflection staring back at me from the mirror above. Lorna had cut me out to keep control. Martin was offering me a way back in on my own terms. For the first time since that morning, I felt the beginnings of a plan taking shape. Martin chose a quiet corner table in a downtown bistro, the kind of place where business conversations dissolved into the hum of background chatter. He didn't waste time on small talk. I want you overseeing the Henderson implementation, he said, leaning forward. Directly. As an independent consultant, we'll pay you double what you were making at Dresch and Alden. The number alone would have made most people agree on the spot, but I kept my expression neutral. There's a potential issue, I said, a non-compete clause. I've heard they updated them recently. He nodded. We checked. You never signed the revised version, and because they terminated you without cause, any attempt to enforce the old one would be flimsy, at best. I let that sink in. All the barriers Lorna thought would keep me out were already paper thin. Martin continued, my legal team can handle anything they try. I'm not asking you to poach their clients. I'm asking you to ensure my company gets the service we paid for. It was elegant still working on the Henderson account, but from the other side of the table entirely. No begging for my job back, no playing defense. All right, I said finally, let's do it. That afternoon, I filed the paperwork for Cardenas Strategic Solutions. The name looked strange on the registration form, like something that belonged to a future version of myself I hadn't met yet, once it was official. I opened a blank document and began listing every client relationship I'd built in the past 5 years. Not the data in the company's CRM, those were just numbers and dates. I wrote down the things only I knew: preferences, quirks, histories, The little details that built trust and sealed deals. By the time the sun dipped low, I had pages of notes and a clarity I hadn't felt in months. This wasn't just survival, it was an opportunity to step back into the arena with my own banner, and in a matter of days, I'd be walking back through the front doors of my old office only this time. They wouldn't have the power to decide whether I belonged there. The security guard at the front desk glanced at the business card I slid across to him, the Henderson Logistics logo gleaming under the lights. His brows lifted, but he didn't ask questions, just printed a visitor badge and gestured toward the elevators. The ride up felt longer than I remembered. When the doors opened, Naomi from marketing was waiting outside the conference room. Her eyes widened, then softened with something like relief. "Maricela," she said quietly. "I'm glad you're here." Spencer stood a few feet away, pretending to scroll his phone. He didn't look up, but I caught the slight tightening of his jaw before he slipped into the room. Inside, Martin and two of his managers were already seated. I took a place beside them, laying out my notes. Conversations hushed when the door swung open. Lorna stepped in, trailed by Tristan and a young woman in a too-stiff blazer, clearly the replacement. Lorna's practiced smile faltered for half a beat when she saw me, her eyes flicking to Martin and back. "Well," she said, voice clipped, "this is unexpected. Maricela will be representing Henderson during the implementation," Martin said smoothly. "Given her role in developing the strategy, it's only logical." Lorna's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. The meeting began, and within minutes it was clear the replacement was out of her depth. She stumbled over basic terms, confused timelines, and skipped key components of the logistics model. Lorna tried to fill the gaps, but her explanations only muddled things further. I kept my tone even, stepping in with clarifications, redirecting questions to concrete solutions. Each time I spoke, the room's tension shifted not in my favor, but away from Lorna. Martin's managers scribbled notes, nodding at my points. Naomi avoided eye contact with her own boss, focusing on the materials in front of her. By the end, the gap between what was promised in the contract and what was being delivered without me was unmistakable. Lorna smiled tightly as she gathered her papers, but there was calculation in her eyes, a silent message that she wasn't finished yet. We were halfway through reviewing the implementation schedule when Lorna's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then rose from her chair with a pointed smile. "I think we need to pause here," she said. Moments later, the door opened again, and Dominic from legal walked in, a folder tucked under his arm. "Ms. Cardenas," he began, sliding the folder toward me. "You're in violation of your non-compete agreement. Section 14, paragraph 3, signed at the start of your employment." I didn't reach for the papers. "Interesting," I said evenly. "Because I have multiple written authorizations from Lorna dated and signed, granting me independent oversight on custom client projects. That includes Henderson." Lorna shifted in her seat. "Those were context-specific," she said. I pulled my tablet from my bag and tapped the screen until the emails appeared, the subject lines and her signature block clearly visible. "The context is clear. Your words, not mine. These agreements predate and override any general clause you're referring to." Martin, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. "If Maricela is removed from this project, Henderson will reconsider the entire contract. And we're not talking about renegotiating, we're talking about walking away." The silence that followed was thick. Dominic's gaze moved from the tablet to Lorna, then to Martin. I could almost see the calculation behind his eyes. The board wouldn't tolerate losing their largest client over a questionable clause. "We'll review this further," Dominic said finally, closing the folder without taking it back. "For now, the meeting should proceed." I nodded and turned my attention back to the agenda, as though nothing had happened. Lorna's pen tapped against her notepad in a steady, irritated rhythm. The rest of the meeting was subdued, the undercurrent of challenge still there but muted by the fact that I was still in the room and staying there. When it ended, Martin gave me the faintest nod, the kind that said we'd both won this round. In the week after the legal ambush, my phone rarely stopped buzzing, but now it was for the right reasons. A supplier I'd worked with years ago referred me to a mid-sized manufacturer struggling with their distribution. 2 days later, a former client reached out, saying they'd heard I was independent now and wanted my eyes on a stalled project. By Friday, I had 2 signed contracts under Cardenas Strategic Solutions. Naomi began sending me quiet updates from inside Dresch and Alden. Her messages were short, factual, and carried a current of disbelief. Marketing lost another associate. The new hire is overwhelmed. Henderson's timelines are already slipping. Then came the one that made me stop mid-email key client, Abernathy Freight, threatening to pull out if things don't improve this month. Abernathy was one of Lorna's prestige accounts, the kind she used to brag about over cocktails. Every report painted the same picture: staff leaving in clusters, projects behind schedule, and Lorna's control fraying at the edges. One evening, as I was reviewing proposals, my screen lit up with Spencer's name. We hadn't spoken beyond polite nods in meetings since my firing. "I shouldn't be calling you," he said quickly, "but things are bad here. Really bad. Lorna's blaming everyone but herself, and Tristan's just trying to stay invisible. I have information that could help you, and maybe help the clients too." I waited. In exchange, he continued, "I need your advice on a situation I can't take to her. Something I don't want traced back to me. It was a calculated risk. But Spencer had access to layers of internal communication I'd never see otherwise. "Send me what you have," I said. "I'll tell you what I think." When his first email landed in my inbox later that night, it confirmed what Naomi had been hinting at. Deadlines weren't just slipping, entire deliverables were missing. Henderson wasn't the only account in jeopardy. I closed my laptop, the weight of the information settling in. The cracks were widening, and if the board hadn't noticed yet, they soon would. The call came mid-morning, my calendar already packed with back-to-back client calls. The voice on the other end was warm but carried a quiet authority. "Maricela Cardenas, this is Lyra Westerly, chair of the Dresch and Alden board. I'd like to meet with you privately." An hour later, I was in a discreet conference room at an upscale hotel downtown. Lyra was there with 2 other board members, each with a slim folder in front of them. She gestured for me to sit. "We've been conducting an internal review," she began, sliding one folder toward me. "What we found is troubling." Inside were printouts, emails, meeting notes, project logs. Lorna's name appeared over and over, attached to work I had done, proposals I had written, client wins I had secured. There were also notes from staff exit interviews describing interference with client relationships and targeting specific employees, me chief among them. "This isn't just poor leadership," Lyra said. "It's misconduct. In light of this, the board wants to present you with 2 options." She folded her hands. "First, we offer you a return director level position, significant salary increase, and direct reporting to the executive team. Lorna would have no oversight of your work." The second board member spoke up. "Option 2, we buy your consultancy outright. You'd receive a substantial upfront payment and a 3-year contract to continue overseeing major accounts. As an independent, the numbers in both offers were more than I'd imagined seeing on paper. You'd have our assurance," Lyra added, "that any remaining complications would be handled." I looked down at the folder again, the paper cool under my fingers. Both paths led back into their world, but in very different ways. One would put me inside the building again, reclaiming space I'd been forced from. The other would keep me outside, with independence and leverage. I'll need time to consider, I said finally. Lyra inclined her head. Of course. But not too much time. Things inside are unstable. I left with the folder in my bag, the weight of it pressing against my side like a loaded weapon I hadn't decided how to use. 3 days after my meeting with Lyra, my phone lit up with Martin's name. His voice carried the kind of restrained satisfaction that comes from watching a rival make their own mess. Beaumont just walked, he said. Second largest account after us. Service failures, no follow-through, total breakdown. It's all over the industry boards. I could almost picture the chaos back at Dresch and Alden. Before I could respond, another notification appeared. Spencer. Lorna's in meltdown, blaming everyone but herself. Emergency all hands at noon. The timing was perfect. I'd spent the last 48 hours refining my own answer to the board's 2 offers, and Beaumont's departure turned it from a request into a rescue plan. I typed it up in clean, unambiguous language creation of a client success division reporting directly to the board. With me as its head, my division would oversee all existing accounts implementation, retention, and client relationship strategy, while Lorna's department would be confined to new business development. No overlap, no dispute over authority. I attached a brief supporting document statistics on client attrition since my departure, projected recovery timelines under my leadership, and endorsements from 2 major accounts, Henderson and one of my new consultancy clients, stating they'd prefer to work with me directly. By mid-morning, Lyra called. "The board has reviewed your proposal," she said. "We're accepting it effective immediately." There was no negotiation, no delay, just a clear understanding that this was the only move that could stop the bleeding. When I ended the call, I saved the signed agreement to my files. The words, "Head of Client Success Division" beneath my name, still looking surreal. Lorna didn't know it yet, but the next meeting she walked into would be the one where she realized the ground had shifted and that I was the one standing on higher ground. The murmur of voices inside conference room quieted when I stepped through the door. Lorna stood at the head of the table, mid-sentence, a stack of hastily printed client retention charts in front of her. Every seat was filled marketing, account managers, implementation leads, most of them. People I'd worked alongside for years. "I'll take it from here," I said. My voice calm but carrying across the room. I set my folder down and looked around the table. As of this morning, all major client retention and implementation responsibilities fall under the newly formed Client Success Division. I'll be leading it, reporting directly to the board. A ripple of shock moved through the room. Half the faces turned toward me with a kind of tentative relief. The other half glanced at Lorna, waiting for her to push back. In the next 30 minutes, I continued, "You'll receive your reassignment notices. Nearly all of you will be reporting to me effective immediately. Our goal is stability, consistency, and delivering on promises already made to our clients." No one spoke. Chairs scraped as people began gathering their things, moving toward the door to await the official notices. When the room was nearly empty, I walked over to Lorna. She was still gripping the edge of the table, knuckles pale. "You'll keep your title," I told her quietly, "and your office. But no clients, no implementation oversight, no team to manage." Her eyes narrowed. "This is your revenge." I gave her the same measured smile I'd worn the day she left my belongings in a trash bag. "It's not revenge, Lorna. I just became so good they couldn't ignore me. The rest is a natural consequence of your choices." 2 weeks later, my phone lit up over and over again, 80 messages from Lorna in total, each more desperate than the last. I didn't respond to a single one, because in the end, Revenge wasn't about destroying her career. It was about standing so far above the reach of her pettiness that she had no choice but to look up.